Morning. First request. Since everyone has a cell phone these days, everyone turn it off or put it on airplane mode. I've been in meetings where some distant warning went off and it was like loud crickets going everywhere in the room. And when there was 2,000 people in the room, it got somewhat annoying. Today, I get a chance to introduce one of my friends and one of my financial advisors, Garth Hassel. 2010, 6:30 in the morning, I strolled into a Toastmaster meeting, and this gentleman and his 13-year-old son strolled into their first Toastmaster meeting. Garth wanted his son to get some experience talking, listening, and leading. We became good friends. I've learned a lot from him, some of which he'll talk about today. Back in 2010, he had recently adopted 2 cats, 2 dogs, 4 kids. And a couple of years earlier, he had pivoted. He had moved from a 20-year career as an engineer, yes, neutralizing waste, to helping people neutralize financial difficulties. The best way, of course, is to avoid ever getting into those difficulties. So he's been helping people neutralize financial risk to families through the hazards of life. In his career, started in 2007, he's repeatedly encountered 7 epic errors that unraveled the fabric of millions of families during retirement. Last year, his book, Keep Your Life, get the full title here. Keep Your Life, Plan Your End Games So Loved Ones Stay Loved Ones. Hit #1 in 5 Amazon personal finance categories. I bought a book not only for myself, but for my late brother's widow and my 2 children. Once I saw what was in it, so I certainly believe in what Garth has to say. Endorsements from the book came from top names in retirement planning, retirement education, investment strategies. Today, continued into Friday morning, Garth will share 7 habits that avert these 7 epic errors. Help me welcome Garth Hassel.
Thank you. It's so good to see your smiling faces. First, before we get started, I'm hoping these 6 people are here. If I call your name and you're here, come see Karen, my wife, Deanna Everett, Jeffrey and Kathy Duplessis, Ron Bone, Donna Denning, Paul or Beverly Thomas. These are the 6 people who replied to my email a week ago to introduce myself, to kind of get you warmed up. So I'm giving you The Power of Zero DVD. This is a documentary from 2018 on the national debt, and it's extremely powerful. So thank you for responding. We love interaction. I want this to be a conversation, not a lecture. This is a class. In fact, where do you think the body of wisdom and experience lies in this room? Yeah, not between these 2 ears. It's here. So as I make certain points, I'm going to ask, or I invite you to share. Don't just holler. If I don't see you, raise your hand, holler, and share a point. At the same time, the topics can be kind of sensitive. So I ask everyone else to take with them the lessons and leave the names behind of anybody who shared a personal lesson. I do have to do a disclaimer for 30 seconds. By the way, at the end of this presentation, I will give you a link to it if you want it. So don't feel like you have to take notes. I mean, certainly take notes, that helps you write. With Stephen Covey talked about the kinesiology, the mind-body connection to writing, and all that good stuff. But I will give you a link to the presentation after today for today, and after Friday for Friday. So, if you're concerned about these things, running out of money, or health, and all the repercussions of what degrading health can do in your retirement, being able to age in place versus go to a facility, or just maintaining meaningful relationships, because we know we change with time. And, let's go to the right spot here. Wondering what you might have overlooked. Because remember, our plans are only as good as the questions that we ask. If we don't ask the right questions, we're going to miss something important. So, if those apply to you, then you are in the right place right here, right now. I thank you for being here because you are the heroes in your family. You're part of the Friends for Learning. You're here to learn. You want to know more. And this topic of retirement is not just about playing golf or traveling the world. We know there's all kinds of repercussions into the sunset years. And you're here to do what's right for your family. So you're part of that tiny minority of people who spend more time considering the retirement issues than they do, say, a summer vacation. I have the honor of being your guide. That's me in the black, and I appreciate being here. The seven habits fall into two basic categories of relationships. And these habits have to do with relationships. You think about what is a habit? It's something that's repeated. Relationships are ongoing. They're not encounters. On one hand, they're with people. That sounds obvious. Relationships are mostly with people. On the other hand, we have relationships with money. There's a lot of aspects to that, not just the jingle of coins or the bills in your wallet. And at a very high level, the people, there are multiple factors in that. Your immediate family, you might have a business. There's a legal aspect to that because society reflects its norms, its expectations for interpersonal relationships through the laws that it sets. On the money side, we have all the things you would expect: income, assets, your style of money. For example, if you worked a regular job all your life, you lived off of paychecks. On the other hand, if you had a small business, it was feast or famine. There were times you didn't know if you'd make payroll, and there were times you had a lot of money, your accountant said go buy a truck because you had too much money. So you're used to that sinusoidal, that's too technical, the ebb and flow, feast and famine. That's a style, because when you retire, you're going from income mostly to either, if you have a pension, we'll get into that, you want to convert what you have, what you saved, your 401k, and your other vehicles, to an income stream, typically. Okay, let's get into 7 habits. That's today. We're going to buzz through all 7 habits. I'm going to move pretty quick. But again, you're going to get all this. And if you miss something, flag me down, and we'll back up. I think we should have plenty of time. Friday is action day. That's when we talk about how do you implement these habits. There's a framework. There are boundaries, there's a structure, and that's going to be the key to making habits effective. So regardless of where you are in your retirement journey, I will venture that there's a common motivation here. That between the 90 people that signed up and the 30 people that showed up, there's a common motivation that you want to build your confidence. In some way, shape, or form, but that's what you want to do. You want to know that you are going to be able to enjoy the best quality of life you can possibly pull together. You want to know that your wishes will be honored when you get into a role reversal situation, and then after you're gone. And you want to capture all the advantages that are available to you. All the advantages. And they're only available to you if you know about them and how to capture them. And finally, in that sunset stage, you might not have thought about it this way, but when you get to that point where there is a role reversal, you want to know that regardless of what happens to you, that your kids, if you have them, they can give you their love and keep their lives. All right, you also know, because you showed up, you're the 30 that showed up, that action trumps wait and see. Wait and see, we hear it in the news all the time. Most of the news is prognostication, it's not about what happens, it's about what's going to happen. All the talking heads, what's going to happen. Then they always end up, well, let's wait and see. When it comes to retirement planning, you have to be proactive. Wait and see is not a plan. It is not a plan. And if you remember nothing else from today, remember this, that passivity portends poverty. Passivity portends poverty, and action accelerates abundance. So there's some alliteration and assonance for you. So you will want to be able to tell your closest loved ones, probably your kids, you want to be able to tell them that no matter what happens to me, you can give me your love and keep your life. Whatever happens to me, you can give me your love, but you can keep your life. At the same time, depending where you are in your seasons of life, you want to be able to tell those people where you're kind of in the queue to become a caregiver for. Hopefully that's not too soon. So I want to give you my love and keep my life. Now, not everybody's the same. I'm going to inject a little bit later on some Q&A to address this. Some families are very good about rising up to the challenges. Other families are not. Okay. So, your relationships, there's 4 levels. You start with yourself. We have a relationship with ourselves. It's the self-talk all the time. What are we thinking about ourselves? What are our expectations about ourselves? After that is our closest loved ones, typically our immediate family. Then our circle, that's friends for life, is friends for learning. Well, I hope you're friends for life. Friends for learning is a circle of friendship. And then, as mentioned earlier, the laws of the land. So, let's think about ourselves. Guys, is this going to be us the whole through the very end?
I don't know.
Do I have to hit play? I don't know. Yeah. I can already tell you that's not me. I just had what's called spinal reconstruction. Now, I'm glad to live in the times we live in, but I highly recommend you avoid one of those operations. So, by the way, if you see me pacing or having to sit, all that kind of stuff, it's better than taking drugs. So, we have expectations for ourselves. And the great equalizer is death. It's coming for all of us. So let's consider this in the terms of lifespans. All right, so interactive time. Ladies, what is the average lifespan of the American woman? Just shout it out. Just shout whatever you think it is. 90? 90? 80? 86?
76.
You realize you guessed long enough you're going to hit it? So, it is 81. So what's the next question?
For males.
Thank you. So men, what's the average lifespan for the American male? 75 is really close. 76. Okay. Ladies, if you're married, and if your husband is older than you, raise your hand. Okay. Good number of you. So, we have this delta here, which is how many years?
5.
5. So, add that 5 to the number of years younger you are to your husband, and that is the average number of years you will live beyond his passing. Of course, nobody's average. We understand that. Everyone's unique to his extenuating circumstances, all that kind of stuff. But it helps us to think in these macro terms. And then, okay, now we understand how the macro works. How does that apply to us? But the short answer is, she's going to outlive me, barring something terrible. I lost a brother to cancer. He died at 47. So she's way outliving him. That was a long time ago. So who knows? But she's going to outlive me at least 10 years, probably 30. Her great-grandmother died at 101. So we have a lot of planning to do, which we've done. So, we know on average who's going to die first. Before we die, let's just pretend it's typical. It's not going to be a car crash. It's not going to be the massive heart attack. Typically, we do this. Right? There comes a point where the dying person needs help. So, honey? No. Who's living with me right now? My wife. Now, honey, how much more do I weigh than you? Round numbers. 100 pounds. No, don't even try. Don't even try. For 40 years, I've been 100 pounds more and a foot taller than her. For 40 years. I don't have my clicker. Actually, we don't have a remote clicker, do we? So I gotta go like this. So I have to stay there. I have to introduce Sarah. Sarah, come on down here. She's my baby. So there's Sarah Joy. Here she comes. She's 5'2". There's her older brother who's 6 feet, 185 on her shoulders. What would you say about Sarah? She's what?
Strong.
Strong. I like to say she's tougher than nails. So Sarah's strong, and in most cases, if my wife can't help me, she's going to look to who probably? Well, yeah, Sarah's here. One of the kids, and on average, who's available more often? If you happen to have sons and daughters, which one is typically more available, or rephrase it, which one's more willing to avail themselves to help? Daughters. All right, you heard it, Sarah. Sarah, I gotta go to the bathroom. My hip kind of gave out. Help me. No, not that way. Pull the other way. Pull the other way. Just pull. Don't drive me there. You gotta get me up. Give me help. Just give me that chair. Okay, it's enough. Just hang. So, is this going to play out well if this is my plan? Is that going to play out well? No, it's not. You know, and let's talk about relationships for a second. All relationships have expectations, whether they're explicit, like in a contract, or implied. They're there. And the reason relationships fail is because of what? Shout it out.
Misunderstanding of the contract.
Right. Unmet expectations. You didn't meet my expectation. You let me down. That's how that works, right? In fact, when it comes to marriage, what's the number one cause of divorce? Shout it out.
Money.
Money? I heard money. Who wants to agree with money? Raise your hand. And I have a highly unscientific fact, but it's a educated observation. This comes from Tony Evans, who's the pastor of a mega church back in Dallas. Counseled hundreds, if not thousands, of couples premaritally, and then got to watch their marriages play out. And he said that the number one reason for divorce, and this is a two-sided coin, so hear me out. The number one reason for divorce is wives expecting your husbands to change. The other side of that coin, husbands, listen up, is husbands expecting their wives to not change. You'll get it on the way home. All right. Yes, sir. I'll be cooperative this time. Okay. Thank you, darling. Just stay here a second. By the way, did you thought I stayed down too long?
Yeah, I go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Well, there's a little drain right here. So, girls, come here. All right, these are my babies. Well, my honey and my baby. I have a couple others. But in this little exhibition here, dramatization, do you know, should I just tell you girls that, you know what, I got a plan, and it's in a binder in my office. Or should I say, we have some serious conversations to have, and I want you to be part of them.
That'd be agreeable.
The latter? The latter. Okay, let's hear it from my girls. So we just introduced habit 1, which is realistic expectations of yourself as you age. We have to be real. We can't have rose-colored glasses and be Pollyanna when we're talking about something as serious as the rest of our lives, especially those sunset years. Habit 2 is the natural extension away from ourselves, and that is realistic, even pessimistic expectations of our closest loved ones. I have 3 sentences. I'm going to ask you to fill in the blanks. Crises bring out the what in each of us? Shout it out through your mask. Worst? Best? Okay. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's trends and there's what we've seen in our experience. But it gets better. Sudden family crises bring out the anxieties. Well, finish the sentence, Steve.
In each of us.
So, in each of us, okay. Anxieties, okay. And in our anxiety, some of us are going to falter, and some of us are going to rise up. Every family is different. Now, in the case of extended care, where it's not sudden, where it's persistent, where it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, where help isn't just showing up with dinner or picking someone up off the floor. It's going on for weeks, months, in some cases years. I'd like to hear from somebody an example of when, in this third question, people rose up in an encouraging way. Anybody want to share an encouraging example? We need some. I don't want this to be a downer. There has to be some encouragement. We always have to plan for the downer stuff. It doesn't mean there aren't rays of sunshine along the way. Anybody have a glowing story of Steve?
My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And for year after year after year.
Pause. Can you hear him? You can. Okay. Thank you.
You can?
Yes, you could.
For year after year after year, my father was a primary caregiver for my mother. And if anything earned him angel wings, it was how he cared for my mother. It was indescribably difficult. But that's what they had.
So there are definitely rays of sunshine in the clouds. How did relationships change as a result of that? Between those who loved the one who rose up?
The rest of the family rallied around my dad and basically said, anything we can do to help you care for Mom, tell us. We'll do it.
So the circle of wagons situation does happen. Anybody want to share a less encouraging, or I should say discouraging example without naming names, of course? Or is it too painful to even share? Let me ask this question. Maybe just keep it to yourself then. Because I know everybody here is aware of a situation like that, either in your family or in your circle. But answer these questions in your head. Did relationships change? Let's say the person being cared for is gone. Now you have the same family, same set of loved ones. How they interact, how they view each other. Has that changed? And if so, how? I'm willing to wager that in a lot of cases, there are people who no longer talk to each other. On the other hand, there might be some new, strong family traditions because of it. They realized they were too distant for too long. That situation brought them together, and they decided to keep that going. So there's always two sides of this coin. We can't guarantee. None of us has the power to guarantee how that's going to play out. We can do our part, but we can't control other people. We can only respond to how they respond. So in terms of planning, with regards to our closest loved ones, which mistake would you rather make? Remember, plans are plans. They're not absolutes. We're just what if thinking. But we want to be ready for it. We want to be ready for the highest probability possibilities, especially when the repercussions are serious. Which mistake would you rather make? Plan based on expecting the best of your loved ones to discover the worst, or plan based on the worst case to be pleasantly surprised and discover the best case actually unfolds. Because the answer is obvious, but if you don't plan for the worst case and it happens, and you're the one who's no longer in power anymore, you are powerless to do anything about it. And that happens a lot. I think you've seen that. Plus, when we look at our loved ones, particularly our kids, their priorities change. They get married. Now they have their in-laws. Or they have kids, or they get divorced. And now you have all that drama going on. Or a second marriage. And the second marriage in-laws aren't as close to your side of the family because they don't have any history together. All those things can mean that when the chips are down, things don't unfold the way logic and nobility would have you think that they should. So reviewing the first two habits, or expectations for ourselves, being realistic about that, and being realistic and even pessimistic from a planning perspective with regard to the relationships we have with our closest loved ones as we age. So habit 3. Now we're getting into the circle, where we spend our time. And that is always knowing to separate the gossip and the hype and the herd mentality, the talking heads, from professional advice. Whether it's medical, I mean, this is a very general thing. It's not just financial. It can be, medical is a big one, right? We know we wouldn't WebMD all our problems away. We do go see doctors. So when it comes to planning your retirement, which is for most people, there's not a do-over on that. Some people who get to retire early, maybe have an encore career, and pull out of it. But if health drives you into retirement early, there is no do-over. So the big 3 with regard to our circle, our sub-circles, are employment, where we hang out, wherever we're spending our time, whether at work, not at work, and then what we feed ourselves. That's the media. It's what we're listening to on the commutes and all that sort of thing. So let's start with the employment side. Raise your hand if, with any of your jobs, I'll say the last job you had or the current job you're in, if you read your employee handbook cover to cover. I would expect that from this group because you are a tiny minority of planners. That's good. That is good. But I guarantee you didn't do it one sitting because you would have fallen asleep. But there's important stuff in there. And a lot of that important stuff, because we all know who's in the details of things, a are these issues. What triggers a benefit? What are the limitations of that benefit? Should you leave? Can you port it? And if so, at what cost? If you're going into retirement, do you even need to report it? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if it's something you need and you might not qualify anymore, that could become problematic. So there was a couple who were empty nesters in their 50s. Ernie worked, made about $100K a year, and got his house paid off. His wife worked for a body shop as an administrative assistant. So she was making 20-some thousand, he was making 100,000. All the benefits was through his employer. They went on a recreational escapade. He had a horrific accident in a situation where he couldn't sue anybody. And it was off the job. Well, suddenly, what he did during open enrollment mattered a lot. So he had his employer medical, which was pretty good. Because he had saved well, he didn't choose his short-term disability, which was for 3 months. He let that go. Like, I'm self-insured for that. Oh, long-term disability, free from the company. And it's 60% of what you make. Oh, but there's a limit of $4,000 a month. So the short of it is, when he couldn't work anymore. Oh, by the way, his employer tried to accommodate him, but he was so badly messed up, he could not keep his job. It turns out that limit on that long-term disability, after he had to pocket out the first 3 months of living, was less than half of what he actually was making. It wasn't actually 60% because there was a cap on it, because the devil's in the details. And this is really, really common in employee benefits, especially when the company's paying for it. And when the company's paying for it, it's also taxable. So the benefit is taxable. Where if you go out and buy a disability insurance policy on your own, you're paying with after-tax dollars, the benefit to you is tax-free. It's a little detail to know. The short of it is, couldn't work anymore. So even with that which he could port, which included his supplemental life insurance, he picked the max amount, which was 5 times what he made. He couldn't afford that a premium anymore. He stopped working, had medical bills piling up, so he dropped it. He couldn't afford that life insurance premium anymore. And so they started drawing from the 401k. Because after his first year of meeting all the accumulators for his medical insurance, meaning the max out-of-pocket was met, it's a new year, he couldn't afford what used to be $300 a month was now $1,500 a month because his employer was not kicking in. So they had to look at other options. But they could have gone to the exchange and got an Obamacare plan, but because they took all this money out of their 401k, because no one counseled them, all that money was income. Because of that, they didn't qualify for a premium tax credit. So the point is, it's doggone complicated. I'm not going to expect you to remember that, but there's a constant domino effect, one after the other. Didn't have enough didn't choose rich enough benefits, didn't understand what the limits were. When chips were down, and suddenly she had to quit her job to shuttle him to all the doctors. The car never got worked on, the house never got worked on. She wanted to get a van to haul him around in, but couldn't afford it. Kept pulling from the 401k. Their income was high, but the money was going to all kinds of other things. So these are super important. Now those of you who read your employee handbooks, you're aware of that. But I bet you could name names of people who around the water cooler said, I'll just check off the block, I'm good. Or I don't need that, I'm good. Famous last words, I'm good. Which comes to the watercolorism. Which, by the way, what's the problem with this picture? There's a serious problem with this watercolor scenario.
There's not much water.
Too many sucking from too little. Which is a perfect way to introduce now, Social Security and Medicare are called entitlements. How does that make you feel when you hear them called entitlements?
Annoyed.
Annoyed. Why?
We earned that.
You've paid into it all your working life. But did it go into an account just for you? No. No. And so you'll hear now, the last couple of months have changed the scenario a lot. Social Security was fixable in the back of an envelope until recently. In fact, because it's so highly political, everybody waits until the 11th hour, hoping that their party's in office and they can claim to be the Social Security savior. But Reagan and Tip O'Neill, back in '83, in April, fixed it until now, essentially, when it was going to go bust in July. I think this crowd understands who Tip O'Neill was. Speaker of the House, Democrat, Reagan, Republican. They worked together, solved the problem for 30 years, 30-something. But there's a lot of drive to take Social Security early because it's going to run out. However, call back to our discussion on longevity. Let's say I'm 62. I'm like, I'm taking out Social Security now. I want to get my paycheck started before it runs out. What have I just done?
Shortchange yourself
By
by getting less over a shorter period.
correct. Now, there is a Social Security break-even calculation that I can do. But what am I forgetting? Who am I forgetting? Who's going to outlive me by? And now my wife gave up her career to homeschool our 5 kids. We built a school, kids range in ability. They're from around the world, and some of them had pretty bad histories in their formative years. So her mission in life was to teach our kids. She gave up well over $1 million in income over that time period. So her biggest Social Security check is going to be mine. Now, for retirement age, she can get half of my for retirement age benefit. Then when I die, the lesser of those 2 checks goes away. If I've locked in that minimum check, I've stuck her with that minimum check for the rest of her life. So that's why she needs to be part of that conversation on Social Security, because the repercussions are huge. Huge, huge, huge. Tens of thousands, if not 6 figures, over the rest of her life. Medicare. This graph actually hasn't changed in the last couple of years, but this is the HI Trust Fund. This report comes out every May from the trustees of the Medicare Trust Fund, and years 2026, Part A is going to have to, there'll be no trust fund. Part A is the hospitalization. It's the one we don't pay a separate premium for. So when you read this trustees report, they talk about the Part A trust fund. Well, we pay a premium for Part B and D for drugs. So B's the outpatient, D's the drugs. They don't talk about that. They say, oh, well, we can just raise the premiums. But we don't pay a premium for this. So all they can do is raise taxes or cut benefits. Or both. Oh, by the way, we're going to come back to Medicare. This is Watercolorism. A lot of financial advisors probably told you, if you went to see one, that in retirement your taxes will be lower. Why? Why would you plan a retirement where your income is lower than you're working? When you walk out of the office the last day, what's changed that you don't need as much money?
Well, hopefully you paid off your debt before you retire.
Hopefully you paid off your debt.
Probably you saved money.
Save money. So saving is the key, because when you're saving during accumulation for distribution, say you're saving 20% because you are the responsible adults in the room, you don't need to save that 20% anymore. So that's the 80%, or some say 70%. However, that's looking at each one of us. That's ignoring the megatrend. The megatrends of, what's the big one? 2 words. Is that hand raised? National debt, what is it now? Roughly. 29 trillion. Which direction is it going?
Down.
Yeah. Where's that money coming from?
China.
That's where it's going to go. They're going to get it from the people who did the best jobs preparing for retirement, higher income people. Your reward for doing really well by having an above average income in retirement, you're going to get rewarded by having to pay off that debt. So the question becomes, most people had a 401k of some sort. Professionals probably in this room. If you work, how many worked at the lab? Okay, a lot. So the lab 401k is pre or post-tax? Pre-tax. So when you were planning your retirement, let's just use a round number, $1 million. So you got $1 million in your 401k. How much of that money is yours? Your statement says $1 million. How much of it's yours?
35%.
Is that your planning basis? Okay. Okay. Little detail is, there's no account number on your 401k. There's a plan number and you're a participant, so it really doesn't even have an account number assigned to you. But the point is, maybe today, based on today's tax laws, you can say, you know what? With my standard deduction and what I need to take out, what the state wants, I get to keep 75%. How long do you plan to be retired? So you had 100. Okay. Great. Great. So that money has to last till you're 100. I'm going to say you're 50, just don't correct me, just say you're 50. That's 50 years. Who here knows what the tax rate is going to be in 5 years? Now extrapolate that thought process out decades, and you don't know how much is theirs. You'll never see that word again the same way. Okay, if you were lucky enough to have a pension, now the INL is pretty good. I think they have a pretty well-run pension, but pension funding is a problem. So much so, I want you to see this.
If you're counting on a pension being there when you retire, you should be aware that there are consultant corporations are busy hiring to figure out how to screw you out of your pension benefit. And that's what's happening across the world right now.
And it's scandalous, and it's creepy.
Everybody seems to like a pension. If you doubt that, try taking it away from them and you'll see how people react.
Those are a risky type of retirement plan to operate because you don't have a lot of certainty today about what your obligations will be in the future.
Well, most people refer to me as the father of 401k because I designed, got internal revenue approval of the first 401k savings plan.
I don't want to do what my father's family did. I don't want to do that.
I know lots of people who have a 401k and it works really well.
When the dot-com bubble burst, my 401k became a 201k. I did not know that you could lose money in a 401k.
I'm ready to retire. We have all of our money, and then the crash happens.
The reality is that you chose the risk-based option where money was in the market.
You give the burden of planning retirement, place it upon the shoulders of the person who knows the least. I think it was a disaster.
There's got to be a better way to try to save for retirement than using something where half your money can disappear almost overnight and there's nothing you can do about it.
And what's been happening over the last few years is, yes, our accounts have been growing. It looks like we're getting wealthier, but the income that we can get from that sum of money is shrinking.
Retirement is so much different, and the advisors need to shift to become income experts and retirement income experts and risk managers.
You have to figure out what are you going to get from Social Security and Medicare.
It's been estimated that Social Security will run out of money, not entirely, but it will run out of money such that benefits will have to be cut by 1/3 for everyone, current retirees, future retirees.
What is often underappreciated is that doing nothing and really politicizing the issue is a way of doing nothing will result in a massive cut to everybody's Social Security benefits.
Okay, reviewing the habits, first three so far: expectations for ourselves into the future, expectations for our immediate circle of loved ones, and separating the noise from professional advice that's specific to you. Habit 4, this will be quick. Licensed live attorneys versus downloading spreadsheets. So I was talking to an attorney, this is back in Pennsylvania where I grew up, and engineer, dots the I's, crosses the T's. His father-in-law passes away, so they need to redo their estate plan for their surviving mother-in-law. And, you know, the father-in-law had he was part of the greatest generation. You know, today you're hearing about cleaning the tinfoil and saving the bacon grease sort of thing. That was where he came from. So this engineer, who was frugal, he downloaded power of attorney for him. So his wife could have power of attorney for her mother. So mom signs it. A few months later, mom has a stroke, has to be admitted into assisted living. 3 months later, they get a call from the assisted living center saying, we have to evict your mother. In Pennsylvania, for example, and every state is different, that's the key, because if you move, you want to update these things. Every state's different. He had downloaded a limited power of attorney, which is only good for $15,000. Once $15,000 was consumed, it expired, it was gone. So they had to arrange with assisted living to out of their pockets to keep mom there, to pay. They found an elder law attorney to help them get guardianship over mom so they could access her funds that her deceased husband had left behind and to manage them for her. So the devil's in the details. There were 2 letters that were wrong in that document. 2. It didn't have UN, which was unlimited. It was a limited power of attorney. Something very easy to miss. So highly recommend working with an estate planning attorney versus do-it-yourself legal. There's a reason why lots of attorneys do not recommend do-it-yourself legal. So, moving on to habit. Oh, actually, this is a bit of a break time. First of all, this is where we go from relationships with people to relationships with money. Come on, you had to love Lovey Houghton, Gilligan's Island. That's a great quote. So let's just take a 5-minute break. If you need it, restroom break. If you don't, we'll keep moving on.
There's an old joke that goes, if I had known that I would have lived this long, I would have taken better care of myself. Well, that comes into play with regard to all the things that Garth is talking about. I'm fortunate that my parents planned and planned well. 5 years ago when I lost my brother, I realized 2 things. A, I had to admit that I lived on the other side of the country from my dad. Fortunately, he was in a magnificent retirement place. The other thing I had to admit was that he was fading. And all those legal documents he had given me and sent me over the years, and all the contact information he had given me with regard to his doctor and his lawyers and so forth, suddenly I realized I had better make sure I had known where I'd put all that sort of stuff. And indeed, I had to use all of it. I had to activate the power of attorney a couple of years later, which was not fun. Who's had to activate power of attorney for a loved one? The rest of you, it's no picnic. No 2 organizations follow the exact same rule. And it doesn't help when you're on the other side of the country in a different state. So I hope you're getting as much out of this as I am. Take it away, Garth.
You need that mic? My battery died. Okay, habit 5. There are all forms of leverage. The word is used in a bad way because there are definitely bad ways of using leverage. We're going to talk about some healthy ways. I want you to think first, though, about people that you know who they retired early, either because their company right-sized, as they say, there's a euphemism, or some functional impairment came along to that worker, or the worker's spouse, or worker's parent, something like that, and cut it short. Have you ever run the numbers of starting retirement 5 years earlier than you planned? The most crucial period of time, I'm going to digress for a second, Question for the crowd. The older you get, true or false, the older you get, the less risk you should take in your investments. True or false?
True.
I'm talking about investments. Not your portfolio, but your investments. False, why?
Because if everything's on it's all securely invested at home, your return can make up whatever income you're drawing from investment. You can be more conservative than you were at 60. You have to still have to make some investments in the stock investment. You can't go all the CDs or all the bonds. Unless you've got tens of millions of dollars.
Right, unless it doesn't matter. I'm going to rephrase what he said and put more specificity into it. So here's a time, this is a fulcrum, the microphone is a fulcrum. This is a timeline. The decade that straddles your retirement, 5 years before, first 5 years into it, is the most important decade. If you're going to be conservative, that's when you're conservative. There's math behind that. I don't have time to get into that, but just wanted to kind of shatter a myth there. What investment, if we're talking about investments, can, upon a triggering event, turn pennies, triggering event, into dollars? What investment, whether it's the Vanguard, Bank of Idaho, what investment can do that? Insurance, which is not an investment. But yes, right answer. Investments can't do that. That's called leverage. Turning pennies into dollars is leverage. Some insurance we hope to never need, like auto insurance, life insurance. If it's term, you hope to never need it. If it's permanent, you're planning on using it. A lot of people will say, especially with regard to like long-term care, I'm going to self-insure. Self-insuring is saying, I'm going to ferret a bunch of money over here, and if I need it, it'll be there. Well, that's great. But if the triggering event for needing that money happens early, and your pile is only this high, and you need this much, self-insuring, you can't do that. Therefore, it's self-funding. There's no such thing as self-insuring. Insurance requires the law of large numbers. Proper insurance, and especially, as this gentleman mentioned, life insurance, any estate planning attorney will tell you it's the most tax-efficient wealth transfer mechanism out there. Long-term care, which I don't have time today, but its history is like a volcanic eruption in geologic time. So that's, the short of it is, the industry missed the mark. They didn't project costs correctly, so you had the problems that you have now. But there's been a lot of innovations with regard to long-term care insurance. However, something you can't put a dollar value on, per se, is called care coordination. That's where you get an independent third party, insurance company pays them, helps you find the care you need. If you want to, you can keep your kids out of it. Because if that situation in your life would create angst, you can do that. Or they can be more like supervisors and give their love and keep their lives. So there's a lot of issues, a lot of side benefits with regard to that. Plus, kids don't mind you spending insurance money. If they're the heirs, they have some will have prefer that you didn't get the best care that costs more money. Tax efficiency is another form of leverage. And this one here is key, minimizing your provisional income. Provisional income is, now that it's not earned income, it's income, now that you're retired, that you've not paid taxes on yet, including income from tax-free municipal bonds. That counts as provisional income, which cascades into how much of your Social Security is taxed. and which cascades into whether you get to pay higher level of Medicare Part B and D premiums. So, strategizing to minimize your provisional income takes years of planning, but the benefits can be tens of thousands of dollars easily. Where one spouse is younger, now I understand everybody's married, but when you have a spouse who's younger and the wage earner retires, and the spouse who's under 65 loses that group insurance, now has to go out into the wild, wild west of the ACA individual insurance. If your provisional income is high, you don't get much of a tax credit and you're paying well over $1,000 a month for your insurance. Whereas if you had managed this appropriately by being tax efficient, not tax evasive, there's a difference, you could earn a substantial tax credit. Most financial advisors have no idea how to do that. They don't deal with health insurance, but there's so much money to be made, they should. Okay, we've gone through 4. Let's move on to, we've gone through 5. Let's go on to number 6, which is, now I'm not here as a rebel, love this country, but let's face facts. Which mistake would you rather make? You've heard this question, this type of question posed before. A, plan that you're only paying 75%, or you're only paying 25% taxes, to discover you're paying 50. Or to plan on paying 50% to discover you're only paying 25. Which mistake would you rather make? Because nobody, no supercomputer, nobody can say how much taxes you're going to pay, I bet even next year with the way things are. So you need to plan for the worst, hope for the best. In the case of planning for the worst, which means you minimize your provisional income, you've paid your taxes when tax rates are at historical lows, you've met your tax obligation. If taxes end up not being as high as you thought, you still know how much money you have. Because if you're not paying taxes on it, you know how much you have. It's yours. It's not theirs. So April of 1942, a few short months after Pearl Harbor, FDR proposed a 100% tax rate over anybody making the equivalent of, at the time it was $24,000, but at $200,000 a year now. All it takes is one seismic event for the heavy hand of government to come down. He didn't get that 100%, but he got 94%. And remember, one way, well, there's lots of ways to increase taxes. It's not just the percentage, it's the threshold to the progressive tiers. The top tier threshold dropped by a factor of 25. So imagine that you've prepared for retirement, you've prepared well, not to be lavish, but well off. Something happens, and suddenly the government says, you're rich. You need to pay your fair share. It's happened before, and it can, well, take it from there. There was also legislative health care sneak attacks. So in 2016, Congress changed the thresholds for the 5 tiers above the base tier for Part B premiums. So the thresholds to pay the higher Part B premium dropped. But that didn't go into effect until 2018. Because what you pay this year for Medicare is based on your most recent tax return, which is effectively 2 years ago. So talk about planning. Talk about age 63 leading to Medicare at age 65. You do a huge Roth conversion at age 63. Oh crap. You might be paying thousands of dollars more when you're 65 for your Part B premiums. Now maybe it's worth it. I'm not saying no. The point is you have to go in wide open, eyes wide open, and plan for that sort of thing. Know what your numbers are the best you can, because we never know all of them. That's why it's called planning. Oh, by the way, last night, I'm not glad to see this, but timing was impeccable. What I don't understand is why Biden is going to increase Part B premiums based on drug prices going up, which is Part D. It doesn't make any sense, but go figure. Now, if you're taking Social Security, you're like, I got a 5.9% bump. It's about time it's not a 0 or 0.1% increase, because we know that the COLA they use for Social Security is nothing like the COLA in our lives, especially when we're seniors. Our cost of living is much higher inflation than the general public, and every time they change the calculation, they change it in whose favor? Theirs. Remember theirs. You'll never think of that word the same again. Theirs. So, the government gives in one hand 5.9% increase in Social Security, and they take with the other. They just jacked up Medicare Part B by 14.5%. So legislative risk is a big one. Okay, so beware your uncle. Finally, habit number 7 is future shock. The times have always changed, but they're changing now at light speed. What we've seen the last 2 years, whether it's big tech and the power they wield, I don't need to go into all that. The point is, how is that going to affect you in your sunset years? So, my other daughter, Sarah's sister, Miriam, she made me, not that she had to twist my arm, tuck her in bed every night. So she was about 10. I was tucking her in. She gives me the death grip like this, pulls my head into her chest and says, "Daddy, promise me you'll tuck me in forever." I said, "I promise I'll tuck you in for as long as you want me to." She said, "That'll be forever." I said, "Well, what if you get married? What will your husband say about me tucking you in?" She said, "He'll do whatever I tell him." The point is, Miriam is a 10-year-old, like any 10-year-old, doesn't have the faculties to project into adulthood. Might we, as sound mind adults, have the same sort of limitation trying to project ourselves into our sunset where we are struggling here? What we assume for our lives when everything's great, in the go-go years, even the slow-go years, it's a whole different universe when we get to the no-go years. Really quick. And the gurus understand in media having posture and attitude is part of selling. It's part of polarizing their audience, repelling the people that they don't want in their audience, attracting those that they do. People want that, like that tribe feeling, but they're still just talking heads. Who remembers the oil embargo of the 70s? Odd even plates, all that kind of stuff. Do you know why? I know there's political reasons. From a scientific basis, why did that happen? Who knows? Never mind politics for a second. We were going to world was going to run out of oil. We were going to run out of oil. The gurus were looking at a curve that said for every increase in gross domestic product, we need X billion barrels of oil more. It was linear. What happened in the 60s? Apollo, which catalyzed computerization of heavy industry. What happened was the most energy-intensive activities out there became computerized, and they became more efficient. And that line went to a curve. Plus, there was a heck of a lot of oil that they had no idea was out there. They didn't know. But the science told the politicians, we're running out of oil. That's what the science said. I'll leave it at that. With regard to the innovations, a lot of these innovations we're seeing today enhance our lives. I think with virtual reality and all of its variations, that even an assisted living home will be able to have lunch in Venice and dinner in Paris. There's lots of cool things that can happen, even with older tech, just touch screens, being able to communicate with loved ones across the country that they couldn't do years ago. But McDonald's can't get enough kids to flip burgers. Why does that matter to us? Because when we're in that situation of needing help, whether we're at home or at a facility, the workers tend to be younger. Now, far be it from me to be curmudgeon. I have kids, and give me something to do, we'll do a little bit, and oh, I don't like that song, I want this song, with the earbuds in. Question for you is, are the changes in technology, the innovations, are they helping our next generation to be more or less attentive to us? The answer is yours. What's your plan? What's your plan? The silver tsunami is coming. That's us. That's going to affect the whole stress on Medicare and Medicaid. Well, that Medicaid too. By the way, Medicaid should not be a plan of anybody here. That would be a safety net at best. Then we have this situation. Noble, loving, rising up, taking care of that child. It's a beautiful, wonderful, loving situation. For whatever reason, one of our kids can't raise our grandchildren. Are these people plan A or plan B?
Plan B.
Plan B. Now they're plan A. Who's plan B? Every situation is different, but they need a plan B. They don't have it yet. So there are the 7 habits. So, we have another class on Friday, but I want to give you a little heads up. I'm giving you the keys to my kingdom. Don't laugh. Karen's trying not to laugh at my kingdom. This is where I can have a kingdom. This is my chance to have a kingdom. Because at home, I'm trying to have breakfast. Glass of milk with my homemade McMuffin. I couldn't, because the cat was right there trying to drink my milk. That's the mean disciplinarian I am. The lowest life forms reign in our home. Okay. So, we're going to talk about action on Friday. I have I'll call it a handout, but I'm trying to save trees here. It'll be a PDF that walks through metal levels, bronze, silver, gold, but I call them metal because it will test your metal to do these. These are hard questions. These are hard issues. There's no pat answers. There's a lot of introspection. And then there's some hard commitments to make. They're called metal levels. Plus it has the other factors on the people versus money side of things. I'll give you a link to that. Have the book. It's $25 on Amazon, $10 here for you today and Friday, or you can have it for free. There was an asterisk on that free, it disappeared. But there's always a catch for free, isn't there? Okay, I'll just tell you what it is. I have some ideas for down the road, because this kind of preparation, everybody's situation is different. I started this day off saying the collective wisdom is in this room. It's not standing here. So I'm looking at starting a community. And I want some feedback on some ideas. So I'm asking you to agree to an approximately weekly email from me. If you're willing to sign your name to that, you can have the book. If it's not worth it, that's fine. So, there you go. Also, on Friday, I'll give you the link to all the downloads that go with the book. So even if you don't get the book, you can get the downloads that support it. All the gory details. No one's going to be excited about 80 pages of downloads, but the point is, these are the how-to, step-by-step guides. How do you find an attorney? How do you pick your team? What do you look for in an advisor? What are the flags? What are the, what's the structure? What's behind the curtain? So like Toto, the little dog, remember that? Pulls the curtain behind so you can see what's really back there. Because what you're told by these big organizations and what's behind the scenes are different entities altogether. Just pull the curtain back. And just for coming, I'll give you, whenever you decide to start it, I'll give you a link to Tom Hegman. He was in that video. He has an online Retire Happy University. It's just on demand as you want. Once you've activated, it's good for 30 days. It's not long, unless you do the bonuses with 3 hours of bonuses. But it's up to you. It's education. You are friends for learning. I'm giving you an online course for free, just for showing up. And to get the book, to sign up for my email list, just do that down here. See my lovely wife, my beautiful daughter. God, I hate these masks. Looking for. And as I promised, I don't know how technological you are, but you can literally hold your phone up to that and get today's presentation if you want it. But I'm going to email you, I'll put a link that you can click to. So, 1 minute left. Any question at all? Any issue that you would have liked to have been covered today? Now we have another day. That's going to be the action day. But is there something I raised that you'd like, Garth, you missed this, or what about that? I'm going to get lots of feedback from her. We've been together 40 years, so she'll tell me like it is. But you can too. We don't have to be together 40 years. Yes, sir.
What's the most recent anticipated date that Social Security benefits will be paid? It changes constantly.
2030 or sooner. Yeah. But the way things are changing, it's gonna, every projection, so you go back to like, let's use Medicare as if they're tied together. The Medicare chart hasn't changed for a couple of years. It's been 2026 running out, but all the years before that, that date was out farther. The trend in the projections are sooner. The way I like to operate as an engineer and the firm I align myself with is to look at megatrends. Because the megatrends matter. Megatrends are like the tide of the ocean. There's nothing you can do about it. It's coming. All we can do is say, what are we going to do with that? How's that going to affect me? How do I get ready? And that's a big deal. A lot of people aren't talking about that. They're all like predicting for next month and all this kind of stuff. Well, it's like day trading. I mean, day trading is great, have fun. You can do that. But that's not how you plan your next 30 years. That's just an activity for now, which is fine. Activities for now are great. We live in the moment. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. But as stewards of the lives that we have and the relationships we have, we want to do the best we can, have every advantage, dot the I's, cross the T's, and that includes addressing the relationships. Those first four are most important. What are we going to do if? What's going to happen to my daughter if? Okay, that's time. Thank you, Steve.
Come on down if you want to take a look at any of Garth's books here.
I'll even sign it. I might be famous someday. You never know.
Question, what time's the thing on Friday?
Same time,
Same time?
same time, same location.
Okay, I didn't realize it was 2.
Is there another question over here?